Freelancers, small business owners, consultants, and solopreneurs. Some people are just drawn to working for themselves. I'm Owen Roth. In this show, I have conversations with self-employed folks about their career journeys. Welcome to the Bossless Path podcast.
And here we go. Today I'm joined by Allison Lamplugh, owner of Lamplight Creatives in Corvallis, Oregon. Allison, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes. So current creative director and owner of Lamplight Creatives. I actually built the business here in town. Kind of collected the idea over pieces of things that I'd done over kind of the last decade as relates to marketing. And 4 years ago, just decided to go ahead and build the business in kind of the idea that I had, which is like an agency format. So full service marketing. And we have maybe 18-ish or so creatives in the network, hence the creatives and Lamplight Creatives.
Sure.
And all of them have a different skill set so that when a client comes to us and has something that they need done, they need a website, for example, but they also need photography, they also need videography, copywriting, SEO services. We have people for that, and I don't need to be the expert in all of those things as much as I'd love to be. I want to keep my focus where it belongs, and so that was the agency format that I kind of put together, was kind of collecting all those people so we can be in one place under one virtual roof. I am now 100% virtual since the pandemic, really.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that
shifted.
That shifted a lot of us.
Yes.
That shifted a lot of us for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. You're the creative director, as you just said. Do you also take on some of the creative roles within what you do for clients as well?
Yes. So my focus has to do with words. My background is in journalism, so I love a website project, especially when we get to create the content for the website. I actually use my background in interviewing for articles when I was writing for magazines or newspapers to do that, because a lot of time the business owner will come to me and say, I sit down and I get ready to start like writing what's going to be on the homepage, and I blank out. They give too much pressure. They have everything they need to know in their head, and they really just need somebody to sit down like this and say, okay, so tell me about this, or this. And then they just word vomit all the things that they have to say. And then it's my job to go back afterwards and start picking out the pieces that we're going to talk about, following up on things that, I want more context for, because I always think about it from, if I'm hearing it for the first time and I'm a little unsure of what it means, then the users of a website might feel the same. So we got to really break that down. And it goes really well. I enjoy kind of using that from my background in my current work. And then that can translate into, writing copy for ads or whatever that might be. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, so that's my big portion. And over the 4 years of growing Lamplight, I did other things like, social media content and things like that for clients. But as I kind of expand and really figure out like where I want to put my time and my effort, I leave my social media strategist to do a lot of that writing and really just kind of work on the bigger, longer form content.
Sure. Yeah, and delegating, it sounds like it's a large part of what you do.
Yes.
Which is a very helpful thing for clients.
Yes. Sure. Creative contractor, if you will.
Yeah, okay. There's another label, yeah.
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've mentioned just in that last bit about some of what you've done in the past. Can we start with your at the beginning and then work our way to the present? Is there too many things to list?
No, it's a long and windy road, but it's a lot of fun. So I was in California for about 14 years between the Bay and LA. I had some other stints in like Nashville and Vegas that were shorter, but I've just been on the move. I'm an adventurer at heart. But for the bulk of that time being in Cali, I was just kind of figuring out like what were the things that I was going to do. And just kind of happened to co-found an independent magazine in LA. And it was with my ex, now ex, but we were basically going around. He was a recording artist, and so kind of underground, not signed to a big label or anything yet. But we were in LA, where, of course, a lot of people are pining to get signed. And we did have people that we interviewed that did get signed afterwards, and it was really cool to be invited to those parties when they were signing and celebrating that. But really what we would do is just go around and we would get invited to particular shows and be backstage with everything from, dancers to performers of any kind and recording artists. And then we would feature them in this magazine. And we had a monthly release party where we would have the copies of the magazine and invite some of the people that were featured in the magazines to be the headliners. And then people would pay to come in for those. But I also worked at my day job, if you will, was working at a printing firm in West LA. So we got a really good deal on printing. And we were using kind of our resources and connections to make that happen. And so, that was kind of my first happy accident, if you will, into kind of publications and really utilizing interviewing skills before I actually went to school for journalism. So
I was gonna
under my belt.
I was gonna ask that if this is something you had a background in, but sounds like no.
No. I've always been. Since I was young, it was poetry or writing in some way, or I did a lot of collages with different words and creating kind of pieces of art with kind of a collaboration of things I would find. So I've always had kind of that creative component in what I've done, and it's always been around words. So it was no surprise when he wanted to do the graphic design and I wanted to take the photos and write the stories. It was and he was the salesperson, because that's not my deal, which was the scariest part of starting Lamplight. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to have to sell my own things.
I can relate to that, yeah.
Yeah. But we just kind of shared those duties and kind of put together kind of my lifelong practice of stuff into something that I could actually tangibly.
It sounds like that was kind of a hybrid. Were you making money from that, or was it more of a getting your partner at the time's music out, and it was more of a marketing?
Yeah, we made enough money to pay for the printing. We were making a little bit of extra money. We both had jobs that we were also working, but those monthly release parties that we would throw would be enough to pay for everything that we needed to do for the following month and book clubs and that kind of thing. So it certainly wasn't our only source, but it sustained itself in the time that we did it.
Gotcha, self-sustaining. Wow. And the primary vehicle was, or the motive, I should say, was marketing. That was the purpose.
He wasn't always featured in it. I think part of it was making the connections, because all of those people were in the kind of same industry, showbiz, and so being able to show up and be in those places, being able to book that club or, get an invite somewhere. I think that was kind of, that was fun for me. It was probably more of a goal for him.
Yeah.
So I think it was more of that because, and I guess maybe he always had some sort of section in the magazine, but it wasn't really about me. It's not Oprah with her face on the front every time.
Yeah. I phrase that more as, I view those kind of things as kind of almost soft marketing. Where you're not directly, and it's just kind of a networking plan.
Yeah, I think so. Again, happy accident. I don't think we necessarily knew what we were doing when we started, but that's definitely the way that it ended up. So it's a good way of describing it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're that type of person who you want to do something, you do it, and then you can learn from it.
Yes.
Yeah. And adapt. Yeah, that's very cool. So and then you mentioned you did end up going to school for journalism.
Yes.
Was that during this?
That was after.
After, okay.
Yes. So that was probably the biggest thing, and and we did that for a couple of years, and then there were some in between stuff. So I worked for a visual arts firm in LA where it kind of helped land projects that would be in visual arts for the owner of the company. And so that was kind of my introduction to media, a different kind of media, because he was doing big production, Spider-Man and that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
With all of that, after a couple of years of dabbling in different areas, I ended up deciding that I was going to move back here back to Corvallis, Philomath, actually, after 14 years of being away. And
so were you from here originally then? Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, I grew up here, moved away when I was 17.
Gotcha.
I actually graduated high school early so that I could move. See, this is the thing my parents should have known. When they give me parameters of how I can do something, they were like, well, you can't move until you graduate. I was like, okay. So I went to school and talked to all my teachers and got extra assignments to graduate 4 months early because I had like something I wanted to do in California. So after I graduated early, on paper, I was able to move. And so it was prior to my 18th birthday, but I came back and walked with my class. So
cool. Okay. Well, there's early seeds of like an entrepreneur figuring out how to do things. And
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So I cut you off there you're talking about going to college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I came back here and enrolled in the journalism program at LB. And
Linben, for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah. Yes. And I remember walking into the advisor's class or the advisor's office before I was enrolling for those classes, Rob Prive, who's incredible. Mm-hmm. And he says to me, well, what kind of writing do you want to do? Because I just knew this is totally my, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would love to do something like, for like tabloids, like TMZ type writing. And he just kind of looked at me like, why would you say that? Because here I am in like Albany, Oregon at this point, and saying, oh, I want to do like, TMZ type writing. And I mean, I actually used to like have those people like showing up for some of our shows and stuff. So for me, it was like very fluid to be like that. And he was and after a couple of years of going through his classes and working at the student newspaper and becoming the editor-in-chief and just really working closely with him, he would joke with me like, I just thought you were like out of your mind when you walked in and said, I want to write for TMZ. And then certainly learned throughout my classes that that's actually not the kind of writing that I love. I love storytelling and being able to get more in depth, and I don't really love that sensational type stuff. So I learned quickly that I wanted to stay away from that. But
oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we do, right? We just grow and change, and our interests change.
Yeah.
Okay. So you graduated, or you finished school at Community College, and then what was the next step?
So then I had a couple of opportunities to go to University of Oregon, but I really decided I had already been on my own for so long, and I was surviving in LA and the Bay on my own income. Mm-hmm. And so I really felt capable at that point. I had something that kind of said like, oh, yes, she did this and got her degree in this. So I started working for LB, and at the time, they had an online school, LB iLearn Online, and it was kind of a pilot program, and they needed marketing. And this is actually where the story starts that kind of led to Lamplight.
Okay.
And so I started off with their social media and doing things there, and then kind of moved into more of like a community outreach type, and then I became the marketing manager before the school decided that they were going to step away from online school and ended up shutting it down. Okay. And so then I was absorbed into another department, which was the extended learning department, which is all of the non-credit classes, the whole side of the college that does, driver's ed and the pottery classes and corporate training. And part of my role was to go out in the community and talk with businesses that either had a place that we might be able to run a class, because LB doesn't have as many rooms as they need for all the classes that they want to run when it comes to all of the non-credit stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we would partner with, the Y and different places around town that had areas that we could use. And in those conversations, I met a lot of people that were business leaders in their roles. And after I was there for the meeting that I was intended to be there for, mm-hmm. they would be like, since you're here, I'd like to pick your brain about some things. And, they either had an idea about something for a marketing plan, or they had been, their boss had put something on their plate that was turning out to be like a total part-time job, and they didn't know where to go or who to ask or who was good. And it was always like the series of the same kind of questions.
Seeing a pattern.
Yes. The void, right? When you identify the void and you're like, there seems to be something. People want one place to go to ask all their questions, somebody that gets to know them so they can stop repeating themselves. I mean, that was a big thing, was like, I go here and tell my story, then I go here and then I go back here and that person's not there anymore. So now I'm telling my story again. Mm-hmm. And they just really wanted one place and one person to take care of all the details. And that's, I ended up leaving that job after, I don't know, a couple of years to start Lamplight based off of what I was learning in the community.
So you're kind of getting like market research done.
Kind of,
like,
yes.
Yeah, without knowing it, of course.
Absolutely.
But just taking notes and listening and paying attention.
Yeah. I didn't really plan on starting an agency or a business. It wasn't like a goal that my 10-year plan was eventually I'm going to get to this point. It was literally just like, I think I'm going to do this. I think I know enough people to make this happen.
Yeah.
And the fact that all the people that are that I collaborate with and I team up with are freelancers. So it's not like I'm employing all of them and all of a sudden I have all that stress of like making sure they're putting food on their table.
Right.
They have other clients too, and I'm essentially one of them, and so it makes it pretty easy as far as overhead.
Gotcha. Okay. Is it I'm curious about, just like you said earlier, you weren't good at selling yourself, or it was a skill you had to learn to sell yourself. What about the cold approach that you had to do at Lynn Benton when you were in that role and you were saying you're partnering with businesses? Was that a skill that you had to learn too, or?
So this is interesting, and it took me a couple of years for like my aha moment to take place. When I look back at for like 9 years, I was in a corporate environment. I was a district manager. I had 6 stores, and this was in the Bay Area, and I had 40-some employees.
This is prior to your creative career.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is still, in Cali. This was the in-between kind of stuff. But this was a long term. It was 9 years I grew with that company. And in that role, this corporate entity that I worked for had 300 stores, and I just managed 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And I was one of 54 district managers. And so in that role, I learned a lot about how to sell and how to approach things from men. And I say this not in a derogatory way at all, but they have a very different way of approaching sales. It's about closing a deal. It's like, these are the steps that you do to close the deal. That's always the kind of the approach that they would explain. Mm-hmm. And it was always really uncomfortable for me, because for me, it was like I wanted to like open a relationship so that people would keep coming back. And so it was like, if they like me and they trust me, they'll bring me on for whatever it is that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. But for them, it was like, you need to close the deal now. There's no time for the relationship building. And that's, I think, why I always kind of struggled with it. I did it. It didn't feel good for me.
Gotcha.
Internally, it just didn't feel like the way that it should be done on my personal level. And so approaching Lamplight Creatives and realizing that, yes, I had to go out in the community and I had to close those deals. I was like, do I, though, have to close them?
Right.
I want to open conversations and relationships. And so I really kind of realized that I was taking more of a feminine approach to sales, like in this portion of my life, than when I was younger and kind of learning from mentors. And I learned amazing things, and I love the things that I learned, but I actually feel aligned now with the way that I approach sales. So I always just thought I wasn't good at it because it didn't feel good. And I think I'm actually okay at it in my own way.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Well, that's a great way to learn, is when you're getting examples of how to do things, then try them out for a little bit. The clothes don't fit, and you can go and eventually you find ones that do.
Yeah. And when you have the freedom of pivoting your plan on your own, in a corporate environment, like everything was written out. Like, this is the process. This is the steps that you take.
Yeah, systems.
This is the deadline to finish it. And so you've just got to, fit in there. But this was like the first time I kind of had the freedom to figure out my own path.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like a very large growing period for you, like both on like the career side and also probably the personal side as well.
Yes.
Was there a moment for when you created a Lamplight? Was there an I'm going to do this aha, or was it a slow brew of just like, oh, maybe I could do this? And then like kind of, for me personally, things usually marinate a long time in my mind before I actually shape them and act on them.
Yeah, I like that. I think it was more of a slow brew, but the brew didn't last for very long before it was boiling, right? Like I actually think I'm a little more impulsive, like, yep, that's what I'm going to do once I just stick my mind on it. And I'm like, so like I said, I wasn't intending on doing it, but when I realized the pattern that I was hearing, it was kind of one of those moments where it's like, I've heard somebody say this 10 times before, 20 times before.
Right.
And I don't remember exactly what was I know it was the summertime. And I just remember kind of sitting there and going, I think this is really doable. Like just kind of thinking about it in my head. And it was literally like the next week that I went to my boss and was like, I'm giving you 3 weeks.
Oh.
Not 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You're welcome.
Yeah, a little bit extra runway for him.
Yes.
What that's okay, so you jumped off the diving board. You didn't try and keep this as a side hustle and like grow it slowly. You just like, this is what I'm gonna do.
Yes.
Done with the job, straight into entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And that's what I mean. It's like, yeah, I might have thought about it for a period of time, but then I just kind of went and did it. And, I felt like I feel very lucky that I had the luxury to do that. Again, the overhead wasn't huge to be able to do. I really could do everything with my cell phone and my laptop. So my equipment was already taken care of. I already had that.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I had so many connections already in town from the time that I had spent working at the community college. And so my process was to just spend the time that it would take to build the website, because I knew that would take a couple of months, figure out what everything is going to look like as far as my business model, and then write that content. And then, of course, build the site. But I would go and meet people around town. I would hear their name and think, oh, I've heard their name before, and they're a creative of some sort, or like connected some way to the creative field that I was going to be working in. And I would just ask them if they wanted to have coffee. This is, pre-pandemic. I was actually very lucky to have started this right before.
Summer of 2019, you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You got a little 9-month window or so there before the world shifted.
Before it got weird, yes.
Yeah.
So I would just reach out and say, you wanna grab coffee? Like, I'd love to chat about like whatever it is you do. And I would always say, like, I'm starting a business, and it wasn't really like I have questions for you. It was just like, I'd like to get to know you.
Yeah.
Some of those people have turned out to be really great referral partners. I'm so glad that I did that, but I made sure I did like 3 a week for that 3-month period before I launched the business.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of setting my seeds. So I am pretty strategic and kind of using my time and building connections with that time. Why I knew that I didn't have, didn't have my website launched. And then just kind of figured, maybe in some of these connections, I might find projects that can be my practice projects.
Sure.
And so I gave myself a goal of having 5 practice clients where they would have a real job, a real task that I would have to do. But I needed to practice my systems and my communication with my creatives, and like, what tools do we need to like accomplish?
Yeah.
Then
I can relate to that. I've done that myself. Yeah. Personal project practice. But yeah, it's good to have like an actual client to use, because outside of the technical side of doing your creative work, it's also nice. Well, for you, that's a huge part of it, is the interpersonal side of it as well.
Yeah. Well, and then, kind of being able to say, I'll be able to put this in my portfolio, because I don't want to launch a website without a portfolio.
Right.
That was a huge concern of mine. It's like, great, what have you done? Nothing.
Nothing. But I will do great things.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that doesn't quite fly. Yeah. I assume clients weren't knocking down your door for that first phase. What was that like? Like, just psychologically, like, I stress when I don't get like things coming in. How was it for you?
I met most of those people through organizations, whether it was like the Foundry or Rain or a chamber, or, there was some sort of organization where I was there at something where someone was like, oh, I have an idea. And then we would just talk about it and figure out like how that would look. I feel like I was pretty patient, which is actually weird for me. But I understood that I had to be able to make my place in order for people to start coming to it. So I didn't put a lot of pressure on, I need to have this now. It's kind of what I just said, I think about, start by starting. It was literally just like, I'm going to meet one person and then I'm going to meet another and I'm going to get to 5. And then after that, I'm going to have people start paying. And, it was just a process for me and I was pretty patient in it. So I don't really remember like losing sleep or being like frustrated. Again, I did that for the 3 months while I was building the website. I was out in the community talking with people, meeting with people. So I kind of felt like I always had some momentum that was happening. And that's the great thing about starting ahead of time or just having more of a strategic plan. Like I'm in a network for a period of time, so then things start trickling in instead of realizing like I have to have something now, so I'm going to start right now. That's like the worst position to put yourself in because you didn't plan for the time that you were going to need it. So I'm glad looking back that I had that foresight that I maybe even didn't know that I had at the time about just making sure that I laid a pretty solid foundation before it was like a necessity.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Sounds like you did it the most stress-free way then. You were able to, at least I should say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Feel lucky.
Jealous.
I know, because I talk to people who are like, I didn't sleep for months. And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. But that's just, I think, part of my like carefreeness also that I kind of mentioned in like my personal life is I really believe that life is too short to not be laughing. I really believe that you have to adventure. I love experiencing things. This is, really the longest time I've lived in one place, like one house since I grew up. Like it's not, all those things that I've done, I was always moving around and that feels good to me. Change is not scary for me. And that's quite unusual, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so it's come easy for me to be able to do those things and just kind of fit in where I need to get in, which has kind of made all of this easier for me than some of the stories that I've definitely heard. So, and I know we all have our own way of getting to where we need to be, but
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great strength to have.
Yeah.
So I've been in Corvallis 7 years myself. I'm not from here originally, and I have started to do a lot of what you're talking about as far as networking and stuff. Of course, my motives are more just I'm generally interested in people because I'm not doing what you're doing as far as like trying to like build a network. But I'm wondering how many creatives you've found in the area because it's a pretty small place, the Willamette Valley and Corvallis in particular. Have you found a large network?
I have. I would say I think 85% of the creatives are all from this area, from Portland, Eugene, kind of Philomath triangle, if you will.
Yeah.
And then there's a few that are in Cali just from like previous connections. But there's a large creative community here. There really is. And people who were really open to the idea of collaboration because I really feel like there are enough people in this town for all of us to serve. And I'm not competitive in the sense of like, I don't want to work for them because they also build websites.
Right.
I've definitely collaborated with other website developers that have a very specific skill set that like we needed to incorporate and we both benefited. So that's kind of my approach. And I've never had anybody that was like, that pushed back about that and was like, well, I don't want to answer that question because I'm giving away trade secrets or something. You know? So it's been very welcoming and a very creative community, I believe.
How did you work it when you were doing these portfolio projects that it sounds like you weren't getting paid for those ones, but you were still using other freelancers. Were you paying them? So were you paying just using that
Yes.
as like upstart cost, essentially.
If there was anything that creative needed to build, or needed to build, and then the client would pay for it. My time and my services were free, and
Gotcha.
really what I asked for was a Google review if they felt like that was worth their time to do. I don't require it, of course, but I recommended that be something, and then a portfolio piece to be able to use, and everybody was very happy with that. So if the job involved something that I could do with Word or within Canva or whatever, then there was no cost to them. And if there was a small fee that a creative needed to do, they knew it was a great deal. So
Sure. That's very smart.
yeah, because that's one thing. It does not feel good to ask somebody else to not feel that they're getting compensated for their time and their value. So
Yeah.
I don't name their price; they name theirs. And if it doesn't fit within the budget the client and I have, then that's okay. It doesn't always fit for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So looking at the network you've developed, is that something like do you have like a vetting process? I mean, you obviously met for coffee and stuff. What is that process like for people to get in that you bring into your network?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was all people that I had worked with personally. And then it was like, well, who else do you know from those trusted people? Who else do you know that might know how to do X, Y, or Z?
Mm-hmm.
So then the referrals would happen. And then, as the years went on, I get emails from people that say, hey, I came across your site and I would love to be considered as talent for the network. So it really just looks like a conversation. We jump on a Zoom call again, because I'm virtual.
Yeah.
And we chat for however long feels good. It's not like you have 15 minutes or like, we
Yeah.
got to go.
Moving away from that corporate environment that you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so first make sure that like it feels like we are aligned in the way we think about approaching projects. And kind of talk about like, this is how I like to do the process. Like you need to be really responsible for your own timing. You need to be responsible for a lot of the creative direction, because, when you do have somebody come in as a freelancer, there's only so much control you can have over their process and their thoughts. And so I can give them all of my feedback as they send me those things that they get those, when their creative juices start flowing, but they need to have a lot of that personal direction.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so if we know that aligns, then, I ask them for their portfolio and I look at their work.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we do a practice project for Lamplight. So I know I'll be able to get to know like how they work on a particular project. Do they meet the deadlines they say they're going to meet, that kind of thing, before I dive right in with a client. Sometimes I don't feel like that's necessary, but sometimes I do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just kind of take it case by case. And then, every once in a while there's a creative that comes on that's just like, that was way too taxing. Like that didn't really work really well, and I think their process is way too different from mine. And
Sure.
maybe we don't work together again. It's never like salty or anything like that.
Yeah.
I need things to be easy. I'm done with things being difficult in my life, period.
Yeah, absolutely. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is it are you pretty hands-on, or is it project by project? So say like, websites, are you like someone drafting a website versus someone producing a video? Are you for like a video, would you be there on location and like, or would it be more like just send me what you have and do you give the green light, or do you just pass it straight through to the client? How does that management work?
Great question. Because I'm building a relationship with the clients, I'm always the first face that they see in the discovery call. Once they, all through the proposal process, that's all coming from me. They never pay a creative. I always pay the creatives. And so I am their point of contact, and I do know them best in the sense that I've met with them more times than the creative, almost 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. So it always feels better for the client when they hear that I'm going to be there, when they have a photo shoot, when they have a video shoot. And so yeah, absolutely. And so I am there. And I find that to be really helpful, because the creative isn't always as attuned to the client and what they like, what they don't like. I gather those things ahead of time. And so it is very helpful to be able to say, and sometimes just that second eye, like, what if we did like an angle from here? Like, what do you think about a shot over here? And I love that kind of stuff. That just reminds me of, more of that production stuff back in LA. And I'm like, that is so much fun. Those are my favorite days when we're out in the field. So I personally enjoy it. But all of the editing process that comes to like videos, even photo, that's, the creative selection of photos they want to send me, that's up to them. I'm not looking at all the raws and being like, this one.
Right. You're letting them do their process, but you are still kind of a middle person between them and the client as far as
Yep. I
guiding.
Always, review drafts before the client sees them. Sometimes it take one draft. Sometimes it's 3 drafts before I feel like, okay, it's ready for the client. So yeah, I'm very involved in that way, but they need to get to the point of it like being ready for me to see, for me to start giving feedback. But yeah, I do have a little bit of a control piece maybe in there.
Sure. I mean, that's part of your job. That's part of why people hire you probably.
Yeah.
Was there any growing period once you started Lamplight? We've already touched on some of your growing phases of life. Was there things that once you started and got going, you're like, oh, this is an area that like my skills aren't quite as sharp as they need to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think figuring out which services that I might actually be able to do and which I don't love doing. Like I mentioned, social media content. I can write a social media post. I can create a calendar for you. I can give you all sorts of ideas and we can, make the graphics and all those things. I actually don't enjoy that personally. Sure. Like it's not a strength of mine that I want to keep honing in. So I think that was a big part of the process is like, what do I want to spend my time on and what do I not, when it gets to the point of like tedious things that I felt like were taking me away from my business in the sense of how I wanted to be in it, growing it, making those connections, I did end up bringing on an assistant, I think in year maybe 2, to kind of take care of like, itemizing my receipts and formatting. I write all of my emails, but like formatting them and getting them scheduled and figuring out what goes when, like that's just like, I don't want to think about it. And so being able to be comfortable with making those decisions about like I'm going to hand over the reins for that thing because that's just it's taking time that I don't want to invest in, and that's kind of uncomfortable to be able to like get to that point and then actually do it.
Sure.
But it feels really good. Now we have like, a process. My assistant's been with me she's still with me for 2 years. And I just literally just send her the thing. She knows what to do. Sometimes I don't even have to ask. It's done before,
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. And automating things was another, it's like the scheduling process in the beginning was like, well, when are you available? 10 to 3. Oh, I'm available from 1 to 2. How about 1:50? And by 7 emails later, you've already, you've finally defined when this meeting is going to be.
Oh, yeah.
So finding things that, scheduling calendars that somebody's just like, here's my schedule. You find a time that you can fit in. And then they pop up on my calendar and then we're meeting. Like that was just a no-brainer. Like, oh my God, this is great.
I need to get a little bit better at that myself. As per our emails back and forth scheduling this.
I think it was 3 or 4.
Yeah. A little idea that maybe I need to learn a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned earlier putting yourself out there in marketing in a prior time in your life that was difficult. It seems like that would be a pretty integral part of what you're doing now. How does that work? How do you acquire clients? Like, what are your streams that you feed into getting business?
Yeah. I have been pretty lucky to have a really strong referral network. Part of it is the town that we live in, Corvallis and the surrounding areas, even Albany, Philomath. I've even got people from Newport. They've met me at events through the chambers. I mean, I am part of, the Philomath and the Corvallis chambers because that makes sense to me. And I'm not the most active member, but I do presentations and I show up for certain events and kind of get involved a couple times a year just to kind of just remind people that I'm there. Those, being able to offer, free sessions, learning sessions, essentially for people to learn things is a great way to gain some clients. Somebody's like, yes, I've been looking for somebody to do X, Y, or Z, and you mentioned it, and now we're in conversation. So that's a big part of it because of the place that we live. That strategy would not be as effective in LA, clearly, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely about the place and the people that are in it. People here love to support local. So, that's definitely something I've learned. But I also invest in SEO every month of the year for the last, 2 years. Feel lucky enough to be able to do that. And so that's my website continuing to work for me to fill those gaps of when, the referral stream isn't coming in, which is pretty consistent. To me, that's kind of my advertising budget is SEO because I know that my website can work for me. So,
right.
Yeah, I would say those are the two.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that first one has extreme value in a small town or location like this, like you said.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you said you started Lamplight the summer prior to COVID. You're obviously still in business. Mm-hmm. So what was that transition like going into that new COVID world? Like,
yeah. So I had in downtown Corvallis, the Foundry is like a co-working space. Brad Attic runs it, and he was a great partner when I first started. I actually had a little space in there that I would set up, and he was great about sending people that would stop in for questions. So that was nice in the beginning, couple days a week to be able to set up there. Then, when the pandemic happened and things like that were shutting down, I already had a full home office set up as well. So that was like a really easy transition. That was like, the moment of, wow, I was spending so much time like driving around and like doing extra things that I didn't need to be doing. And I can be spending all of that time, actually doing things that are bringing value.
Yeah.
And so that's why I just decided to just stay virtual because I feel like it's much more efficient for my time. But I think as far as watching the trends of what took place, I was in a business that was not negatively impacted by the pandemic, in a time when everybody realized I am not equipped to be selling online, to be, advertising online. My competitors are doing better at both of those things that I am. Yeah. A combination of all of those or just some. We were building, for probably the first year, 5 websites at a time.
Wow.
It was just like bam, 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 bam. And then after about, I would say a year and a half, it really started to shift to Google Ads, SEO services. And so people then, it's like I'm looking at this now and I'm like, oh yeah, they got the website and then they needed to start competing in the digital scape. So then they started coming for the ads and SEO and that kind of thing. So I've kind of watched this progression of, consumers changing the way they're buying and forcing businesses to change the way that they spend their advertising budgets.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, yeah, the pandemic actually affected your business in quite a different way than it did for many others. Yeah.
Yes.
And it shaped how you are operating today, it sounds like.
Yeah, I could still meet with people on a regular basis via Zoom, right? Sure. There was no issues with social distancing or anything like that. And, all my creatives are working in their own spaces anyway. So that process was already, already fluid. So I really, I didn't have much adjustment that I had to make except I didn't have to go to the Foundry a couple days a week and maybe had on yoga pants instead of slacks,
Yeah, those sound like easy things to adjust to for you. Yeah. You kind of listed that, like you said, Philomath and Newport, and for those who aren't in this geographic area who might be listening, like those are very drivable within under an hour, well under an hour. Mm-hmm. Do you also service outside of the Willamette Valley in the local area as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had people in California and Colorado, kind of the localing. My SEO is really focused on local. I'm not trying to compete nationally. And so I do get most local. But yeah, we've definitely had neighboring states, people up in Portland and that kind of thing as well, reaching out from time to time. So yeah, I really don't have any limitations as to when somebody reaches out.
Yeah.
If we can help them.
Obviously, your network and your clients are strongest in the hyper-local area, so that's where you cater to. But yeah. Because as you're listing some of your services, like the SEO and, copywriting and stuff, that could be for anyone in the world.
Right.
But obviously, the connection has to be made for someone to look to you.
Yeah.
If they're in New York City or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you figure out, like, how are you able to tell a client who comes to you, say they want a whole marketing campaign, video, photo, and just like graphic design, copy, everything, email, a newsletter. How do you project a cost to them if you know you're using freelancers who use their own rates? Mm-hmm. How do you approach that?
Yeah. Well, I'm always very upfront with all of the clients that, that these people that I collaborate with dictate their own fees. And so what I'll do is through the discovery call, when I learn about their vision and their goals and their timeline, all those things matter, of course, to how quickly we need to move and all that. Then I meet with the creative, tell them all of those details, and have them bid out the project. And sometimes I'll ask a couple creatives to bid out a project. If it's a graphic design, we have multiple graphic designers. I also am looking for like what fits best in the price point that
Gotcha.
because I have some people that cost more money than others, and that's under their own terms. And some clients that are willing to pay that higher dollar amount and some that aren't. So I kind of have to figure out. And then once I get their bid, I work in my bid, and that kind of becomes the overall proposal for the client. But part of the collaboration that I have with the creatives is I do a lot of the things that they don't have to do because I take care of all that initial stuff. I'm really a glorified project manager in a lot of ways. And so a lot of them are really excited. Like, not only do they not have to find the client, but they don't have to do any of the tedious stuff. They just get to do the thing that they love to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm always conscious about what a fair price market value wise is. I definitely know that we are not the most expensive. We are definitely not the cheapest. I don't believe in that. I feel like you get what you pay for. And so, if you're looking for super cheap, you can find that somewhere else. I know that our quality is worth more, and being able to stand in your value was something that took some time to really become comfortable with. But I do believe that we have the value that we put forth in front of us, and I know it's fair. I'm not asking for something that's like completely out of this world. So I just kind of take it case by case.
That actually leads me to thinking about that value thing and what you're worth or your time services are worth. That's a tough one for, I think, a lot of people, myself included, of course. When you started, did you feel like there was a lot of like price adjustment and like imposter syndrome when you would say a price?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just sent a proposal yesterday, and I was literally like, at the send button was like, can I really be asking for that? And it's realized like, no, this is a great deal. I'm going to do it. I'm going to send it. That's what we have to do to get out of our comfort zone and get to those levels. So I definitely had that. Certainly in the beginning, when I really don't have this huge portfolio and like I don't have this laundry list of things that we've done, I really do think like, is this a good price for what? But it was a lot of years in the making. My skill set didn't start the day that I started Lamplight, right? And so I had many years in the making to also consider. But I think in the beginning, you want to maybe negotiate in some ways. Like somebody's like, ooh, that's a little bit more than I was thinking about paying. I was thinking something more like this. And you're kind of thinking, well, I don't want to lose this client. So I guess I'll come down a little bit in my price, meet them in the middle. And that just really never felt good because I automatically felt like going into the project that I was bringing more than I was going to be receiving. Yeah. And I don't think that's a good position to put anybody in. That's why I mentioned earlier, I never negotiate with a creative about their price. It's like it either works for the project or it doesn't. But I never want you to feel like you're undervalued. And that's kind of how I would feel. And so, again, with those boundaries, kind of learning is just kind of realize that it's okay if I'm not the right fit for the client. It took a couple years to be okay with that. But ultimately, we're both going to be happier because they're going to feel like they get what they pay for, and I'm going to feel like I gave what I was worth.
Yeah.
So yeah, and honestly, I find that the people that want to pay less always ask for more.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
It's so true. And so it's like as soon as somebody starts negotiating, I'm automatically like, ooh, no, actually my price just went up.
Right, yeah. Yeah, kind of a self-weeding process.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I ask it both because I have personal interest in that question because I struggle with those same things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that the imposter syndrome of asking this price tag, and you're like, oh, I never made that much when I worked at any job prior. But then you're like, oh, I'm bringing this, so I need to be comfortable with it. It's a tough thing to. Yeah, actually pull the trigger on or click that email send.
Oh, I know. It's like, woo, sweaty palms. Okay, I did it.
Yeah, it's out there. Yeah, can't change now. Yeah.
I would think part of, and I've thought about this, my time in LA, specifically LA, because that's just land of like plentiful, bountiful, like everything, excess. Mm-hmm. I lived in Hollywood, and so I was very much part of that community. And I would see when we would be out at a club, for example, people dropping $20,000, $25,000 a night at their table.
Wow.
On a regular basis. And so, and private jets waiting, and then they're headed off to Turks and Caicos or like whatever the thing is. So when you're actually exposed to that in real life, like we all see that on TV, but like that's actually like real life for people. But you start to see that, you learn that there is somebody that will pay something for anything.
Yeah.
And that was actually really helpful for me to see that kind of excess, because it wasn't just something that I saw on TV and thought, oh, that doesn't really exist. And I'm not saying we have particularly that situation here in this town, but there are certainly people that have that kind of lifestyle where it's like, if I feel like it's worth that value, I am willing to pay for it, disposable money type thing. So that was a real eye-opener for me, and really good to be able to help me work towards that process of, I know somebody can afford me. I just have to find them.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a really interesting experience to have, especially like leading in prior to starting your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, very informative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned you have an employee, or maybe she's a contractor for you, your assistant.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? Like, you had previous experience in the corporate space, it sounds like, so you knew how to work with people. But
yes,
I'm assuming it's a little bit different when you just have the one person working with you.
Yeah.
Was there a big learning phase with that?
Because I started, I think my first management role, I think I was 22 when I started in management, and then I've kind of been doing it since then. It's actually a strength of mine. I know that, I can say that with confidence. I'm not being arrogant. And so one of the biggest things that I learned in management is that you just can't expect people to be like you. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, I don't really care what your process is as long as the end result is what we're looking for. I'm okay with whatever it takes for you to do that, as long as we achieve the same goal in the time that we're supposed to. That was a tough lesson to learn. At first it's like, I don't understand why they're doing this. This is so easy. Why don't they think like me? Why don't they do the same steps as me? Right. And that's just really frustrating, and it doesn't make anybody feel good. So that was like, long time ago, kind of what I learned in the management process. And so when I brought on Rebecca, that was kind of the process of talking about like, okay, this is what I would like you to do. How do you feel about that? And then do you feel like you can figure out a system that can make sure that we get it done by such and such time? And she just was excellent about figuring out her own way. And she would tell me like, okay, this is where you find these things, and this is where you find these things. And I didn't control what that looked like, as long as I knew where to find it and when it would be there. So it actually went, and she is the type of personality that's really good for that too. She has good self-direction. If it was somebody that really needed me like holding their hand the whole way, it wouldn't work the same, because I'm hands off. I'm definitely more of a macro manager.
Gotcha.
I'm micro when it comes to projects, because I want every detail to be right, but I really want people to be able to swim on their own. I am definitely not trying to steer the ship. So
yeah.
So yeah, no, it's been great working with her, and we don't really have any, big issues that come up because she is accountable to herself.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works well.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing this for 4 years. Do you see yourself doing this for a long period of time? Do you see yourself always being self-employed from here on out? How do you balance that?
Oh man, yeah, going back to not being self-employed would be tough. I definitely, I love it. The flexibility that comes with it, and I'm driven, and I'm a taskmaster, and I can definitely hold myself accountable to when I need to do something. So, I know that doesn't work for all people. Some people are like, oh, I get so distracted working at home. I want to go do this, and like nobody's looking at me, and I could, just not do something, and nobody would know.
Yeah.
I very much hold myself accountable and I'm very productive when I need to be. And so it's worked out really well that I can get everything that I want done, but also play too, because that's the piece that I really felt like in my corporate stint. I was on call 24 hours a day. Wow. My stores were open 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Plus I had to deal with security alarms. There was oftentimes getting calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like I look back at it and I literally would get, anxious if I left and I didn't have cell phone service because somebody was going to need something and I wasn't going to be available. And I look back at that and just there was a lot of time sacrifice that I wasn't necessarily paid for when you're on salary. Yeah. It's somebody else's dime. So yeah, I don't look forward, and I know there's a median, that you could achieve between both of those things, but I really love being able to just block out my calendar and I'm going to be gone because I'm going to be gone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that leads me to my next question. I was going to ask you what your week and your day-to-day looks like, but so you carve out time when you dedicated vacation or whatever time. Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself doing work or work-related tasks like 7 days a week, or is it vary too much to even say?
I would say over the last 2 years specifically, because, in the beginning, it's just about grinding and like figuring it all out and thinking about it all the time and probably working, maybe not 7 days a week, but probably 6. But really thinking about kind of what I just said and feeling like I gave a lot of time in my previous work life. It was not a goal of mine to have a business that consumed me. As long as it afforded my lifestyle, then I wanted to find a system that would work both ways. Mm-hmm. So it took me a couple of years to really dial down, like, what does that look like? And one of the first things that I noticed right out of the gate was my schedule, meeting with people and having to do things for clients was really, it was dictating my days. And I didn't have big breaks between things to really, if I have to write content or really have a creative process and I only have 30 minutes between meetings to do it.
That sounds stressful just hearing that.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it was like, I need to figure out a way to, really what it led to was time blocking and decide, what are my blocks of time going to look like throughout the week? And so what I've landed on, which I really love, is that Mondays are actually blocked off of my calendar for people to schedule. And that is my, what I call Lamplight Day. And so everything that I do on Monday, for the most part, relates to growing my business. Whatever that is, writing email campaigns, writing new content for the website, creating social media graphics, reaching out to people, network, whatever. That's what I'm doing on Mondays. And I'm trying to put aside client stuff to be able to focus on my own business because I also have to grow that, Sure. So Fridays, then I also block out, and that's for my client work day. That's my long form content stuff, my bigger projects that I'm going to need 3 hours to do or just more lengthy. And so that gives me the freedom of Fridays to just knock things off. And so Tuesday through Thursday are my chunks of time that people get to book me and schedule me for what they need me for, creatives or clients. And I get things done in between, but I feel like it's a really fair balance of like my own time, my Lamplight time, my client time, all of them combined. And then it's really important for me to have a personal life. So I do not schedule things. My boundaries are very strong on the weekends. I mean, it has to be like, there's a photo shoot or there's a video shoot and we need to do it on a Saturday. It's like, okay, fine, great. That's no problem. Yeah. But I'm not going to do anything else on the weekend unless something is burning.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That must be very nice to have that intention in your schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find yourself like, are you a person of routine? Do you have like in your personal life a schedule? Like personally, I like to like wake up and do like yoga at the beginning of the morning before I even have breakfast or anything. And the days that like I can't because I have other obligations to work or other things, it's just like I've noticed it starts to throw off my routine. And then if that happens just, a day or two, not a big deal. But when it goes for like weeks at a time, it like really throws off my rhythm. Do you have anything like that?
It's so funny that you ask this because like one of my best friends, and also she's kind of my business bestie, we mastermind together and do a lot of things together. She's very much like that, wakes up, she has her journaling time, she has her yoga time, she's taking it real easy for the first couple of hours and then diving into her day. I'm totally not like that. I wake up, about the most routine thing that I do is make coffee. And then pretty much the first thing I do is grab my laptop and start doing.
Okay.
I utilize the time that my boyfriend is not at the house too. The house is very quiet. I don't have kids. I don't have so I know that I've got this period of time that's like just mine. And so I really utilize it. And so my routine is really wake up and start working. But I also, don't put a lot of pressure on like I have to be working by 7:30. Like I do allow myself to sleep till 8:30, 9 o'clock if I want to. I mean, I just need to walk to my office.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
I'm not putting a lot of pressure into it. I would say that the way I approach my work life is totally different than my personal life. I am like totally on island time with my I am never on time for anything in my personal life. Like I am completely the opposite. I know even my mom one time was like, you do arrive on time for your clients, right? I'm like, I do. I swear I do.
She's a little bit worried that you might not be able to feed yourself because you're,
yes.
your business like your personal life.
Yeah. So it's kind of a strange. It's not, I know it's not typical. Usually you're very routine in both parts of your life, but for some reason I'm like adverse to routine in my personal life.
I mean, for me, I like the thing that's interesting is like I'm very like good with my personal finances and like, just like keeping track of my spendings and the bills and all that. And when it comes to the business side, I don't know why it is, but like I struggle to have the equal amount of like togetherness with my business finances. I still do it and I'm not like, not leaving things lapse, but like for some reason, there's just a difference there when it's like my personal life and my business. And it doesn't make sense logically. I can't figure it out, but
same. And I stopped trying.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm okay with it. It's fine. I would much rather be accountable in my work life because people are counting on me.
Right.
And,
yeah.
It's not like I'm like being rude and standing people up in my personal life. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Just maybe ish. I'll be there 9-ish.
That's good. It's good that you're honest with people and they're like, oh, okay, Allison, we're supposed to be here at 1. It's like 4 o'clock. Yeah. She said ish.
Yes.
Ish could mean 3 hours. Going back to the question, self-employment sounds like it works for you quite well. Would you ever see yourself getting a day job, or is it this is the life and this is how it's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't now. And I also am not a huge long-term planner. So, you ask me that question 5 years from now, and maybe I'd say, I'm open to it. I'm not really now. I've had people that have approached and been like, oh, they're looking for a part-time job to do like this for a marketing department wherever. And I'm just like, oh, would I have to like show up and be in meetings and like, I don't want to do that at this portion in my life. So this is how I see it going for now until, a circumstance might change where I feel like I have to do something different. But
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally understand that answer.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for anyone who is considering going on about Bossless Path?
Yeah. I mean, certainly what I mentioned earlier about identifying your void, making sure people want the thing that's in that void, and then finding a solution for it is kind of key, right? But I think the biggest thing is that people can get really overwhelmed. I've definitely talked to people that are like, oh man, I've had this idea forever, but I just don't know where to start. It's just a lot. And it does take a kind of personality that kind of can chip away at things. But my advice there would literally be just start by starting. Do one thing and then do another, and then don't be looking at the list of 100 things you have to do. Just look at the first 5 and then do them, and create boundaries for yourself in the time that you need to do them, or the time you need to not be doing them, or whatever it is. But start by starting is probably some of the biggest advice that I got from someone when I started my business, and it has been huge for me. It's like the simplest thing, but literally don't look at the end goal. Just look at what's right ahead of you, and then eventually you'll get to where you are, and then you'll make new goals.
Gotcha. Start by starting. It's a nice little phrase.
Huh?
Yeah, I like that. I'm probably going to use that.
You can.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. All right, so how can people find you and Lamplight Creative? And
yeah, so, lamplightcreatives.com, kept it real easy with the URL. Every email sent through those contacts forms go right to me. That is the best way to get a hold of me. And so, yeah, I would just say that. And, around town, you might see me. I'm connected to the chambers. And every once in a while I'll pop up with workshops and learning sessions and things available. But find me on my website.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Allison. Thanks for spending the time with me.
Thank you, Owen. It's been fun.
Yeah. All right. And there you have it. It's been a fantastic conversation with Allison. And if you want to hear more similar to this, please subscribe or follow the podcast. Until then, this has been the Bossless Path. Catch you later.